Hi everyone, my name is Carlos. I'm a web developer based in New York, and today we're going to work on a project called Piano Keys from the web development path. Now, in order to complete this project, you should be familiar with JavaScript, how to write functions, how to pass them around and assign them to variables, and how to write loops. We should also be a little familiar with HTML and CSS and how certain pages are structured. We're going to be working a lot with the DOM and grabbing elements, so you should be familiar with what kind of attributes you would find in these elements and what kind of styling attributes they would have as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started in the project. Okay, so at first glance, we see our text editor right here with some JavaScript written on it. On the right side, we see a browser with what it looks like a little piano player and some lyrics and notes, a little box right over here on the right. If you click on this directory here on the top left corner of our editor, you'll see all the other files. We should have an index HTML file, and we should also have a styling file. We won't be working with them right now, but it would be handy to bring them up so you can actually see how the website is structured. Pay close attention to the ID names, the classes, and what they're wrapped on. So let's go ahead and get started. What are we trying to do here? So we're basically going to be acting as a web developer who got hired by a music education company, and they want us to create a little game to help their beginner level piano students study. So we're basically going to be managing and manipulating this piano player right over here. So let's go ahead and get started with the first step. So for step one, at the beginning of the code, we have variable names assignments for the keys array and the notes array. There's also a function looping through the elements of the keys array and pushing them to the notes array. So here we have an array of all the keys, and we have an empty array called notes. And we're looping through these keys and pushing into the notes array the elements grabbed through the key names with this. So pay close attention because we're not actually passing in string names, we're passing the elements that are being grabbed by that class name. So when we pass in, we pass document.getElement by ID for the C key, we find that element here, which is right here, and we pass that into the array. So from there, we can actually grab that element and alter it in any way we want. So for our step one, after the second comment, create a function named keyPlay that changes the background color of the keys when they are pressed down. Be sure to use .target property in the function because the target is being modified in this case. So what we're essentially doing is whenever we click on one of these keys, we want the background color to change so it looks as it's being activated. Right now I'm clicking on them and it's not doing anything, which is what's expected. So let's go ahead and start by writing our function under the variable name called keyPlay. Set that equal to a function. Now it's important to know what will happen here. Well, this function itself is supposed to trigger some sort of event. So we want to pass the event here. So we're gonna, let's say we click on a note, the event will be triggered and it will basically be altered through what we write in this code block. So we can write event.target. Oh, sorry, I got the wrong line here. Event.target. What is event.target? This is basically the property that returns the element that triggered the event. Once we have that value, we can actually use dot notation and call a bunch of other attributes on it. We want to change the color for this, so we have to actually access dot style, which will give us access to a lot of CSS properties that we can change and combine and alter in many ways. So in CSS, what you would find for a lot of styling names, you can be background color, for example, is written right here. You can call position. There will be a little different syntax for these attributes when we're using this kind of syntax, but it's mostly the same. It's going to be working with camel case for this case. So background color, it's actually with a capital C. And there we can assign it whatever we want. You can call it red, purple. I have a light green color that I like, so I'm going to set it to that. Perfect. Now nothing is happening just yet because we're not really doing anything with this function. We simply just defined it. So that's it for step one. Let's go on to step number two. Now we're going to create a function named keyReturn that returns the background color of the keys to their default with an empty string when the mouse is released on the element. Be sure to use the .target property. So we're going to do something quite similar. Let's start by running our function here right below the key play. Let's call it keyReturn. Let's pass in the event as well, event that will trigger this. So when we click on a key, we want it to change the color. When we release the click, we want the color to go back to its default color. These don't really have a background color, so we can just set an empty string for that. So all we need to do is simply write the same syntax we had for the previous function, target.style background color, and set that equal to an empty string, which will basically turn it back to its original color. Perfect. So that's it for step number 2. Let's move on forward. So like I said, these functions are not currently doing anything now. In order to be actually appended to the elements, we got to assign them as the values of event handler properties. So in step 3, we're going to create a named function and leave the code blank for now. And this function will be used later on to assign events to the keys. So it should take one parameter, and you can call it node. So we need the nodes to be able to access these functions. So let's go ahead and start by writing our function and passing a parameter called node. I'm going to call this the event assignment. Set it equal to a function. I'm going to pass in one parameter called node. Okay, perfect. Let's move on to step number 4. So here we're passing on node, which was basically stored in this array. And for each node, we want to pass in these functions so that when there is a click, it triggers this handler. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to first target the node itself so that when it's clicked, we do something with it. So right here in the instructions number 4, inside the function, create an event handler that runs the key play as an event handler when a mouse down event fires on any node. So when the mouse down event fires, emphasis on the syntax here, mouse down, we will fire a certain function. So let's go ahead and start by writing on mouse down. The on mouse done, it's an event that occurs when a user presses the mouse button over an element. We don't want it to be clicked, because if we click it, then it changes the color, then it will stay as a color. But we want it to just change the background color while we're pressing on mouse down. So now we will have to assign this event handler, this trigger, to the function keyPlay. Now we can't simply just set equal keyPlay, since it would just redefine this function here. We actually need to pass in a function that has an event and basically triggers the function keyPlay. So we can do that with an anonymous function. So we're going to pass it in like so, function, and then in here, we pass the function that we want to trigger. So we basically created an event handler that runs another event handler, which targets this background for that specific node. Perfect. So that's step number 4. We're going to do something similar in the next step. For step 5, we're going to create a second event handler property that runs the key return when the mouse up event fires on any node. So we're still going to remain in this same function that handles event handler properties. And we're going to do something very similar. Instead of on mouse down, you guessed it, we're going to use node on mouse up. We're going to basically do the same thing. The only thing we're going to change is the function that we're going to call when the mouse is released. So on mouse up, we want to actually invoke the key return function. So all we have to do is pass key return here, pass in the event, and that's it. So that's it for step 5. Now for step 6, at the beginning of the code, we have variable name assignments for the keys array and the empty nodes array. There is also a function looping through the keys array and pushing the keys elements to the nodes array to be assigned a variable name. Now you must create a for each loop that will pass the elements in the nodes array through your event assignment function. So what we're going to try to do now is to basically have give each of these elements that we grabbed access to the event assignment option, so that whenever a key is selected or clicked, it has access to this event assignment option. So it will know that when we press on mouse down, it will target this function and call it off. So with this, we can simply just grab the notes and create our for each loop. All we need to pass in here is the event assignment function we created. Remember, we're only passing the function definition, not the function call. So all we have to do is pass event assignment. That's it for step 6. Let's move on forward. Now I would say go ahead and save this. And once you save it, you can actually go ahead and test it now. Now that we actually have each element being able to access the event assignment, if we click on a note, it should change color and remain as a changed color as we press down. And when I release it, it changes back to its original color. Good, so we're looking fine right now. Let's go on to step number 7. Oh, which I guess we just did, where we tested our code and made sure that each node here changes its color. It also happens with the black keys and all the keys here. Perfect, and you can change the color to whatever you want. I chose this light green color. You can put red, orange, whatever you please. So for step 8, next, there are variables that represent the progress button in the song box below that allow students to progress the piano. The next 1, next 2, next 3, and start over change the lyrics and musical notes of the song to help the student play along. So these lyrics here that we find in these boxes should be changing as we click this button here for line 2. So this would be the first line with all the notes for each section of the lyrics. If we click line 2, nothing happens, but we should be seeing a change of the lyrics, the notes, some of the notes, and this button should be saying line 3 because we're moving on towards the next line. And of course that didn't happen. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this again. So we're going to be working with changing this button into the next one that we have. So let's look at the variables that were stored for these buttons. We have next 1, which grabbed the element by the ID of first next line. There's next 2, which grabbed an element by the ID of second next line. Now you might be wondering where are these other buttons? I only see one button right here. Well, let's go to our index.html file and scroll all the way to the bottom. Here you'll see all these buttons here. So we see only line 2 button with ID of first next line, which would be this one. Now the other ones you are not being displayed because we have an attribute for those elements that's called hidden. These statements are hiding all the progress buttons. We still need the first one, but the other ones are being hidden since we don't really need to access them before getting to line 2. Now this is just an attribute that we can change and manipulate as we access the nodes of the DOM. So now we must create events on all the progress buttons, and first we create an event handler property with a click event on the next one element. So that means we want something to happen. Right now when we click this, nothing is happening. We want something to happen when we click on that button. That button is stored under the variable named next 1. So we want an onClick event targeting that element. So we're going to start by writing next 1, and there's a property we call nonClick that will basically do some sort of event handling, trigger it when there is a click on that element. Before I jump ahead, this is basically all required for step 8. It is incomplete. We're going to continue writing the handler in the next step. So to begin modifying the songbox, you must switch the progress buttons first. Using an anonymous event handler function, make the following changes to the button that appears after next one is clicked. So we had an anonymous event handler function right here on an event assignment function. We're going to do the same thing. So let's set this equal to an anonymous function here. And inside here is what we want this to be executing when we click on this button, on this element. So first we want to reveal the button after this, the next 2 button here. And we want to hide this button so we don't have 2 buttons that say line 2 and line 3. Once this is clicked, we want this to disappear, and we want the line 3 button to show up. So like I said, they currently are hidden due to this attribute, which is set to true for all the buttons. We're basically just going to flip this so we can change the next button and hide it and reveal it, sorry, and then hide this current button, which is the next one button. So let's go ahead and first target the button after this one, which is next to, and let's call that attribute hidden. And instead of saying true, we want it to be false. So it's not hiding, and then it shows up. Next, we also want to actually hide the next one button, which is the button that we're targeting. And we're going to set that hidden to equal true. Perfect. So when we click on this button, we will hide that button itself, and we will reveal the button that comes afterwards. Perfect. Go ahead and save this. So now you can actually test it out. When we click on line 2, boom, we changed it to line 3. Perfect. Let's go on to step 10. So it's good with changing this button, but we're not only changing this button, we're changing certain things from the lyrics and certain notes as well. On step 10, they're telling us which notes will be changing. So next, a click event firing on the next one must change the music notes that guide the piano student through the song. Add the following changes to the next one event handler function, so the musical notes change when the button is clicked. Okay, so we should be getting different notes for certain elements when we click on that button. So we're going to have to change the content of the element with an ID of letter note 5 and letter note 6. Now we're going to be using this method called getElementById. What this does is basically returns an element object that represents the element whose ID property matches the specified string. So keep it to account that IDs are meant to be unique. So this makes sense that it should only grab the only one ID that has that same title or same string. Okay, so we're going to add this right below our hiding of the buttons. And we're going to call that with document.getElementById. And then we're going to pass in the string of the ID we want to select. So we already know it's been telling us in the instructions we want letter note 5. Perfect. And now how do we change the actual text that is in here? Well, we can simply call the property inner HTML. Inner HTML is basically sets or returns the HTML content of an element. So let's say we console log this, we would get the letter C, which is what's displayed right now. So we can reassign what's inside that content by saying .inner HTML and set it equal to whatever we'd like. For note 5, we're going to set the note equal to D. And I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this and set our next letter, which is letter 6. We're going to set that equal to C. Perfect. Go ahead and save this. Now, as you work through this, it's good to actually test manually what you're doing. So I would click, let's click on line 2 here, and we see both the button changed, and we also see the notes, the inner HTML for these elements changed from C to D and D to C. Perfect. So let's move on to step 11. So now that we have this following button, which is the next to button, we want to continue the next to the lyrics. So we have to create another event property with a click button, similar to what we did here, and then assign that to a property, the property to the value of an anonymous event handler function. So let's go ahead and click select next to. We're going to do the same event handler triggering for that one than we did for next one. Assign it to an anonymous function. And that's it for step 11. Moving forward. So what do we want to happen after we click the next button? Well, we want to continue on to the following button. So we're going to have to do something similar than what we did for the next one on click. Instead of hiding this button, we're going to hide the next to button now. So let's reveal the next 3 button, which is the button that comes after line 3. So next 3.hidden, we're going to set it to false so we can actually see it. And then we have to hide the current button we clicked so we don't see 2 buttons at the same time. Awesome. Save this again. And and go ahead and test it out. And this, when we click this, we should hide the line 3 button, and we should show the next button, which says line 4. Good, so we're doing good here. Let's move on to step 13. So once a student has reached this point of the happy birthday song, the lyrics changes from happy birthday to you to happy birthday dear friend. So we gotta also now change the boxes here for the lyrics. This would be the word 5 element and word 6 element. We already know the IDs of these elements due to them being written here. But like I said, also look into the HTML. I think it's good to actually realize and have a good see very clearly what you're selecting and where is it located in your HTML file. So if we look here, we see that word 6 and word 5 is going to be changing. Word 5 is equal to 2, and we're going to change that to dear. And word 6, which is you, will be changed to FRI dash. So let's go ahead and do that with document.getElementById. I'm going to write a new line, document get element by ID. I'm going to pass in the string that they indicate right there, word 5. And like we did in the previous function, we can set its inner HTML, set it equal to dear. Perfect. Copy paste this line. Do the same, except we'll change the word 6 and we'll change that to RI dash. And indent this here. Okay, go ahead and save that. And you can test it out again. And there we go. We see that the lyrics changed here for the word 5 box and the word 6 box. Awesome. So we can move forward to step 14. Now you have the lyrics, happy birthday, dear Fre. To finish the line, you must add the dash end to the song box under the piano. The dash n element is stored in the last lyric variable. We can see that right here on line 36. The last lyric is grabbed by an element with an ID of column optional. Add a statement to the event handler function to the next to element that changes the display property of last lyric to inline block. So let's go ahead and look in the HTML. Where exactly is this element for the last lyric? Let's investigate this a little bit. Okay, we see here a section with an ID of column optional, and it also has a class. Now, if you look at the other sections, there's no classes for this one. And if you're familiar with CSS, you should know that inline block is a CSS attribute. So we can actually look into the CSS and find this ID with column optional. Scroll down a little further down. Right here, we see its display as none, meaning there is nothing being displayed in our page. The display none is actually commonly used with JavaScript to hide and show elements without deleting and recreating them. So you can think of what we're going to try to do now. Once this button is clicked, we want to target that element, which is this one with the ID column optional, and we want to change the display to inline block. So let's go back to our JavaScript file. We'll scroll further down right over here. And at the end of this, we can call that style through the last lyric variable. So let's start by running last lyric. Now we can grab the style of it. And remember, I can directly call .style on this because the element is already grabbed from the document. So I can call the attributes to it. So I can change the display from that and set that equal to inline block. Go ahead, save this. And now you should see the change when we actually click on this button. You see the display of this box actually changed from hidden or none, display none, to display inline block. All right, awesome. So let's move on to step 15. So for this button, we not only want to change the words and display the last lyric, we also want to change certain notes so we don't have to play the same notes over and over again. So we're going to be selecting the following elements with these IDs and changing their HTML to whatever corresponds. So I'm going to just grab one of these lines here, and I'm going to copy paste it 5 times, or 4 times, sorry. And we're going to change the elements that we're actually grabbing. So this one would be letter note 3, and we're going to change that to the letter G. This would be letter note 4. We'll change that into E. We're going to grab letter note 5, change that to a C. Letter note, and I already noticed a spelling mistake, probably out of me. Go ahead and save this. Now you can see, let's say I have a spelling mistake and nothing happens. Just make sure you double check your code when you're writing and you're actually accessing the right element names. If you're familiar with Google DevTools, you can also inspect the site and kind of figure out what is going on with that. So let's go ahead, save that, and now we can test it out on our page. So we see these notes, click on the button, the first change, click on another button, and then we see the final change here. You see that the notes changed, we displayed this box, and we changed the 5 and 6 box or lyrics to dear and FRI-end. Perfect, so let's move on to step 16. So we have one more button to click, and this will be, I believe, the last lyrics for this. So let's create another on-click event on the next 3 button, which is the last button, I believe. So same as we did before, let's go on and write next 3 on click. Perfect. So let's move on to step 17. So here we're going to use an anonymous function, just like we have before, and we're going to change a few things with a few buttons. So let's go ahead and set the anonymous function. Now what do we want to do? We want to reveal the start over button by changing the dot hidden property to make the start over button appear. And we also want to hide the next 3 button, which is the button we're actually clicking, by hiding the dot hidden property to hide the next 3 button. So we know that the start over button is already a variable stored here, and it's the 4th next line button, basically this button right here. So when we click that, we want to change that button, make it disappear, and we want to see a button that has the start over dialog. So let's go ahead and start by revealing the start over button. So start over hidden attribute, we're going to set that to false, so it's displayed, and then we're going to hide the next 3 button. So we can do dot hidden equals true. Okay, great. So go ahead and save that. Run it if you'd like. Perfect, there we go. That hit the button and revealed the following button. So let's move on to step 18. Now we have to add the last lyrics of the happy birthday song. So we're going to change the contents of all these lyrics, and we're going to use the same thing we have before and change them to the last part of the lyrics. Let's go ahead and write document get element by ID. We're going to pass in the first word, which is word 1, change its inner HTML, assign that to HAP dash. These are all found right here. So there's going to be 6 changes we're going to make. So I'm just going to grab this line here, copy paste it, and let's change these words. Word 2, 3, word 4, 5, and 6. And we'll change the lyrics here. So the next lyric would be PY, then it would be birth. Put on my caps lock here. Birth and A. 2, U. Okay, cool. So now that when we click that button, not only will we hide the next 3 button and reveal the start over, we will also change the text found in these elements. Save that up again, and let's test it out. So First change works. That works too. And then boom, we see the change in the rest of the words. And happy birthday to you. Now we see a problem here. The last element here should not be displayed. We're going to fix that in the next few steps. So in step 19, we've changed the lyrics already. Now we want to change the notes. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new line. And step 19 here, the instructions already tell us which ones we're going to select and what we're going to change them to. So let's start another document.get element by ID. Pass in letter note 1. And set the inner HTML equal to the letter F. Go ahead, copy paste this. I'm going to do that 5 more times. And unindent this a little bit. Okay, good. Oh, I just realized I selected the wrong element. It should be letter 1. Letter note 1. And you can fast forward this if you'd like. I feel like you have a good idea of what I'm doing here. Letter 2, 3. Letter note 4. Letter note 5, and then finally letter note 6. And let's go ahead and change their notes. So we're going to start with an F, another F. This will be an E, followed by a C, a D, and then another C to end this. Okay, go ahead and save this one more time and go ahead and test it out after it saves. So we can see the changes here. And lastly, boom, we see how the notes changed as well. So we did pretty good here. Remember, we changed these elements here, which are found on here under the lyrics right over here. Okay, awesome. So let's move on to the final step. And in the final step, we see a tiny little bug here. Now that you have the lyrics displayed, happy birthday to you, dash end, that couldn't be right. To finish the line, you must get rid of the dash end in the song box. So this here with the note A. So all we need to do is, how do we hide this element? Well, we simply hide it by adding the display to none. So we just alter the display for this specific property. So all we do is last lyric, style, display, change it back to what it originally was, which is none. Save that up. So that should hide the last box. Let's go ahead. Oh, I did this typo. It should be last lyric. Let's save that one more time. So now when we get to the last part, we should not see this box, which is displayed when we click the previous button. And there you go. Perfect. So we have finished our piano player here. Now we saw how certain elements can be manipulated. We typed document.get element by ID around 1,000 times. So you should be familiar how it works. Remember, we're actually selecting an ID specifically, and the whole purpose of IDs is that they're supposed to be unique. It would be a complete mess if we're selecting by class here for a specific thing. Now you can work query selectors. There are many different kind of selectors you can use. This is a very basic one, which is very useful. And we saw how we can reassign the text values inside HTML using .inner HTML. We also saw how to pass in, how to create event handlers when we want to set them up to a specific kind of function. We can do them right over here. So that concludes our project, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.